Hello, this video is about how to use ChatGPT to be more productive. First of all, let's look at why believe me. So I would submit several of the studies that have happened since ChatGPT came out. This is one of the first ones that came out a couple of months ago, actually, and there are several others. I'll put a link to this one, but there's just more and more coming out of the fact that certain types of jobs are made more productive when they integrate ChatGPT into their tasks. So I'll put a link to that. Long story short, they're 37% faster at completing tasks, and that's with just starting to use ChatGPT. My estimate is that will actually increase over time as people get better and better at using ChatGPT. Additionally, I believe this was done with GPT-3.5, and GPT-4 is superior, even if it is maybe a bit slower. I think it's fast enough. I'd like to think it's still probably overall on balance going to be even better just because the results are better, so there's less kind of rework. Another reason to believe me on this is that this is directly relevant to my long-term experiences, specifically what is called industrial engineering. I was basically an industrial engineer for about 8.5 years. I have a master's degree in industrial engineering, and industrial engineering is like efficiency, optimization, data. And I got the theory, and then I got the practice of it within a semiconductor factory with just massive amounts of data, where I learned a lot of like how a human integrated system is made productive. And you can think of a single person as a human integrated system as well. So I understand a lot of the principles of what makes things productive. So I'm not just some random person who's never studied productivity or efficiency commenting on this. I do want to point out that there are some types of work that this doesn't really work for. So like maybe a mechanic it could work for, but basically the more kind of what's called knowledge work that you do, the more likely this is to be helpful. If you're doing email a lot, or you're having to brainstorm or think or plan or document, this is generally going to be ChatGPT is generally going to have a lot of opportunity to make you more efficient. Sort of like another way to put this, kind of white collar versus blue collar. So a blue collar job would be, again, like a mechanic or like an electrician. While there might be some uses for a mechanic or or electrician, I'd say that it's probably much less for those kinds of people. Okay. So let's just get into some of the different ways in which you can use ChatGPT to be more productive. I like using it to check things. So you could check data, spelling, grammar, math with like a little asterisk. It's not quite as good at that, but they do have the Wolfram Alpha plugin. And then the GPT-4 is much better at math than GPT-3.5, but still kind of not completely there. Now, the thing about, there's other checkers out there for spelling and grammar, but I like that it's kind of all in one place. You can integrate it into checking multiple things at once with ChatGPT. My favorite, and what I use it most, have used it the most for, is basically brainstorming. You can brainstorm fun things or GIFs. That was actually really helpful, brainstorming some GIFs. I use it a lot in business when it's just like I want to kind of get the brain juices flowing, and if I'm kind of stuck on something, or just as a starting point, asking it not to brainstorm for you, but like asking it for some good questions. That's one of my favorite things to do. What are some good questions on this topic, on topic X? Or here is what I'm looking to do. What are some good questions that will help me move aggressively through the brainstorming process? And then you actually ask those questions to GPT-4, and this is extremely helpful. Now, it's not always, so if you're working at like a very surface level, like high level, it's going to give pretty broad generic answers that are sometimes unhelpful. It's really useful to get really specific with this, and what is it that you're looking to do? What are the constraints you have? And the more information you can give it, the better. And so I wouldn't expect, this is not like a one-shot thing. It can work as a one-shot thing, especially for like GIFs or something. But for like business and marketing, it's more of a conversation. But I've found that it's really good at coming up with novel ideas or remembering things or thinking of things that I just either neglected to think about or forgot about or whatever. It doesn't really, it really covers a lot of different bases. So I really, really like ChatGPT for brainstorming. I feel like it's extremely helpful and speeds the process along quite a bit and gives better ideas. Gives access to better ideas. It's not that its ideas are always better. Some of the ideas are definitely crap sometimes, but oftentimes it's like, oh wait, I didn't think of that. That's a really good idea. It's kind of along the same lines. It's kind of two parts of the same coin to some degree, or two sides of the same coin, which is planning. I think you can think of GPT-4 like a consultant that has certain flaws, but that is really strong in certain areas. And that has just an incredible breadth of knowledge, much less like deep knowledge and more just like a really super wide range of knowledge, so it can combine multiple seemingly unrelated things, which can be very useful. But also, brainstorming is kind of part of the planning process. I like that it can give you different perspectives. So you could say act as a business coach, or you can say act as a marketing consultant, or act as whatever, and you can get different. You can even have it kind of talk to itself and have a discussion and a brainstorming and a planning session with itself. Now, there are some issues that I have with ChatGPT, specifically the documentation issues, and that it's really hard to kind of use ChatGPT a lot and then be able to access your old planning. So you do need to pull it out to different places. And I am working on a solution to that. It should be released soon, called Hyper Prompts, that is like a better way to use ChatGPT that's more organized and more searchable, more shareable, stuff like that. So while this isn't, I think, an issue, I call it an issue, but that's not judging OpenAI negatively. They're an AI model company. They're not an AI user interface company. And so it makes sense that their user interface would, leave a lot to be desired. I don't think they take any issue with that. At least I wouldn't think that, because I think it's a valid criticism. There's no search, and there's no search. It seems like that should be easy for them to add. So clearly they're not thinking about it from like a big picture, like a business using ChatGPT, many times a day for months at a time. How do they do that in an organized fashion so they can do, not have to, so they can reuse prompts that worked out, but not just prompts, but reference old answers so they don't have to keep asking the same questions. Anyway, off my my little sales pitch, I guess there. I think it's also really good for conventions, and I don't mean conventions like when you go to an event. I mean how to programming is a really good example of this. I'm trying to struggle to find the exact words for how to put this. But I have some examples. So single answer, the proper patterns that you're supposed to do. Programming is just a bunch of conventions for the most part. The syntax, how exactly do I need to work this sentence? It's really good at that. But also, if there's any specific number formats or text formats for certain things that need to be in a specific format, it does a really good job of that, especially if it's something that's kind of well known. Engineering formats or data formats, if there's certain patterns that things have to follow, it's really, really good at that. I love that. One of my favorite things to do is to ask it to rap in the style of Yoda about something, right? Like it does that actually really, really well, because it's good at kind of getting the patterns and knowing the patterns and following them really, really well. And you can actually ask it to do things in table format. That's actually really useful. So also with programming. Now, I'm not being a programmer myself, or I think I'm kind of in a middle area where I have a lot of experience programming, but I'm not exactly a programmer. In terms of I'm not a professional programmer, but I've done a lot of, some professional, but not really. That wasn't like my main job title. I did it within my industrial engineering job. And I've taken computer science and programmed more languages than I can remember, but I would consider myself still kind of like a non-programmer. And I think that this works for non-programmers and programmers. So I'll speak first to the non-programmers, because that's kind of the perspective of what I did. What I did with my Python scripting, I had never programmed in Python, and I was able to create some scripts for some objectives, some things that I wanted to try to do. So don't just try to learn, have an objective, have something you want to build. something that seemed pretty simple, and I used Python quite a bit at first, and then I used it less and less. It was really good at, again, is this line of code correct? Maybe sometimes I wasn't sure, or here's the code, give me the code for this. Okay, debug this code or comment this code. Really, really good at that for a non-programmer getting started. Especially, it's really very fast at going from something to nothing, basically. That said, I think programmers get a lot more out of it because they know better the questions to ask, and they know the context. They're better at checking to see if it's wrong, because sometimes it's not right or it misses something. There was a specific thing I remember that it just didn't know how to do it properly. It kept doing it incorrectly, and it couldn't see the error, and so it was harder for me to debug. Now that said, I think non-programmers have more to gain initially from doing this, from learning, from trying to use this to create a script that's useful in their life or their business. I think you can spend like a day or two and create something pretty useful, because they're going from zero to something, while programmers can do more with it. And I personally, if I was a programmer, I wouldn't be worried about this taking my job, or at least I don't think it's useful for you to be too worried about it. Not that you can control that completely, but more to the point, I think that if you use the tools, if you learn to use the tools, and you're a good programmer with the tools, and they make you even better, then you'll be one of the programmers that's left over. Also, I do suspect, even though I know that there's a lot of programmers that have lost their jobs recently, I think that's more of a reflection of the tech companies. But I think that there's just, sometimes when things get more efficient, it doesn't necessarily mean that there are less jobs. It just means that there's already a lot of demand for it. It just means that there's more productivity out there. Not sure that's 100% true for programmers. I think it's very true for like doctors. So I wouldn't be as worried about it being a doctor, even if AI moves heavily into medicine, which I think it already is to some degree, but even more so because there's just such a huge demand. There's an unfulfilled demand for medical professionals. I suspect that there's something similar for programming, because there's just kind of an unlimited need for software. Anyway, getting a little bit off topic here. So also, it's useful for generating website text content. GPT-4 is very good at this in certain areas. If you're talking about something that's like an emerging market, something new, ironically, trying to ask ChatGPT about AI, or trying to write content about AI, it does a pretty bad job of that in some ways, because it doesn't have data. The data is about 18-20 months old, and so it doesn't have some of the most recent things, some terms that just didn't exist 18 months ago or weren't kind of common knowledge out there on the internet. You could use it to generate image prompts for other image models, video scripts. I really like using it for summaries. This is similar to website content, or just sometimes if you just see a really long article and you just don't want to read it, you can just put it in there. And so I guess this isn't necessarily generating, but it generates the summary, and you can either sometimes use that summary as website content, or sometimes use it just to kind of like, okay, I don't want to read this whole article, just give me a summary of it. It's very useful at that. I will point out real quick, there are some risks, so it's not all good. And I'd say the biggest one is probably hallucination. So especially when generating content, not as much with brainstorming, because it's not necessarily factual answers, although sometimes it might be. To me, this is the biggest weakness, where it confidently says something is correct that is not correct. So you do have to be careful of that. That can be a loss in productivity. If you one of the biggest things in like a factory, for example, or just any sort of human integrated system that causes inefficiencies is rework. It's a much bigger cost than it appears when you have to go back and rework things. And so this is actually a major inefficiency, because even if there isn't a hallucination, having to check for them decreases the productivity. But also, if there is one in there and you don't notice it right away and you have to come back and fix it later, there might be a whole bunch of other systems that were built upon that, or data or whatever. And so you have to the rework isn't just that one step, it's also potentially a lot of the steps that happened afterwards. Good news is that I do think that they're getting better at this, and I do expect that OpenAI and other places will maybe not completely get rid of this, but dramatically reduce the amount of this that happens. So that's pretty helpful. Anyway, hopefully you like this video. This is productivity and efficiency is my jam, And please like and subscribe if you like this video. Leave a comment if you have any questions, or if there's anything that you think that ChatGPT does that helps you be more productive that I missed here, or if you think it makes you unproductive. I'm happy to hear about that. Thank you very much, and have a great day. Bye.